So we've got the Oxford comma, Oxford shoes, we have Oxford shirt, the Oxford collar, Oxford grey, but nothing more Oxford, I think, than the Oxford English Dictionary. We talked in the last video about the house in Oxford where the Oxford English Dictionary was mostly created. In this video, I want to talk a little bit more about those who contributed to it from all over the world. Writing of the Oxford English Dictionary was really the ultimate project for an expansive British Empire. It was needed because English was becoming a de facto language all around the world. And to write it, it also needed readers from all around the world with access to printed books to be able to send in quotations to show how words were used. And it was possible to do all this because of the steam trains, steamships that shortened distances between the ends of the British Empire, and the penny post that let anybody send letters anywhere really around the world. And those who sent slips of quotations to Oxford were from all over the world. New Zealand, Africa, Australia, Canada, United States. It needed these contributors. It needed to be fully inclusive because it needed to show how words were being used by English-speaking people outside of Britain. And the Oxford English Dictionary was a way for those people who were on the edges of the empire and outside of the closed circle of academics to contribute to a project that really was perhaps the greatest academic undertaking of the 19th century. And they were a colorful cast of characters, united by one devotion, a love of the English language. One colorful character was Margaret Alice Murray, no relation to Dr. James Murray, the long-standing editor. She would go on to become an archaeologist, but in her early 20s, she was living in Calcutta with her parents, would read books and send in quotations while sitting on the flat roof of their house in Calcutta with the voices of tea sellers rising up from the streets. The cast of characters also included a couple of murderers. One of them was the Arctic explorer Sir John Richardson. Around 1820, John was in his early 30s and on an expedition to explore the Northwest Passage. 2 years into this voyage, caught in bad weather and storms, his crew landed sick, hungry, and exhausted. And one of their explorer team members was a native Iroquois, Michel Terre-Haute. He went out and brought meat back with him, claiming that he and 2 other members of the company who had gone on ahead had found a better location. Well, they all went out the next morning but couldn't find those other 2 team members. Michel went off again with a hatchet and again brought meat back to the group. The group began to suspect that he had murdered their 2 colleagues and was hacking off parts of their frozen bodies to bring back. One man accused him of murder. Michel shot this man. Richardson had no choice then but to shoot Michel as well. When the company returned in 1822, Richardson was met with suspicion over this murder and the evidence to support his actions. 30 years later, Richardson wrote his memoirs of another expedition, which was used by readers of the Oxford English Dictionary, and as it included many of the first written use of certain Canadian words, parka, beech tree, beaver, laughing goose, among others. And Richardson himself was a slip writer, mailing in over 20,000 quotations. And there was another murderer on this colorful cast of characters, Dr. William Minor. And Dr. Minor's story is really well compiled in this book, The Professor and the Madman by Simon Winchester, although it goes by, I think it goes by another title in England. But worth reading. And the summary of the story is that the Oxford English Dictionary editor, James Murray, had been receiving thousands of much appreciated slips, quotations being sent in by this Dr. Minor. One day, Harvard's librarian came to visit him in England at the scriptorium where the Oxford English Dictionary was being compiled. And Harvard's librarian, Justin Winter, said, You've given great pleasure to Americans by speaking so positively as you do in your first volume of the English Dictionary about Dr. Minor. It is such a painful case. And Murray said, Dr. Minor, the psychiatrist at the Broadmoor Asylum, why was that painful? And Windsor said, psychiatrist? No, he's not on staff. He's a patient. And went on to explain how Dr. William Minor had mentally suffered from his years serving as a surgeon on the front lines of the American Civil War. Then years later, he was visiting England and he was robbed. He thought he saw the robber in the evening shadows on a cobblestone street, fired 3 bullets and killed a man, but he killed the wrong man. An innocent man who left behind a wife and children, and so he was imprisoned at the Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum. He was found innocent by reason of insanity, but had to stay locked up for the rest of his days. And at Broadmoor, he was given 2 rooms. One room which became his library, and he devoted himself to reading and trying to give back to society, which he did by sending in quotations on slips, over 60,000 of them in total over the years, making him the 4th highest contributor to the dictionary. Words in the dictionary that he contributed to include banana and bamboo. Over the years, then, Murray went and visited Dr. Minor in the asylum and relied on him to find words that he was struggling with. Anyway, I recommend Simon Winchester's book. It really is a thrilling account of Dr. Minor's life and work with the dictionary. And Winchester makes a profound point about the horrors of the American Civil War that led up to the series of events. And that itself is fascinating, that the weaponry that had advanced so greatly leading into the American Civil War, the guns and bullets were so more effective than any prior war at that time. But the training and the treatment were about the same as they were 7 years earlier during the American Revolution, for example. So men still charged picket lines, but were hit from over 100 yards away now by these new rifles. And then they were treated without any modern medicine or anesthesia. So it was a traumatic time to be a soldier and a traumatic time as well to be a surgeon. And who else contributed to the Oxford English Dictionary? Well, Jane Austen, for one. She had a great ear for the detail of conversations that she heard. And while she predated the work on the dictionary by about 50 years, she wasn't, therefore, a slip writer. And she didn't really invent any words, but she was the first person to write down a number of words in English, and her letters and novels capturing those words are referenced in the dictionary. From Jane Austen, we have the first known use of the word outsider, for example, which she used in a letter in 1800. We also have sponge cake, chaperone, and doorbell, among others. Well, I highly recommend Sarah Ogilvie's book, The Dictionary People, The Unsung Heroes Who Created the Oxford English Dictionary. I pulled most of the stories for this video from this book, and there are many others in it. She made it really easy for me, actually. She's really a great storyteller, so I certainly would recommend that if you're interested in the stories from the dictionary. And if you're interested in the founding of the dictionary and the Oxford-based team who edited the Oxford English Dictionary, please see my last video. That was from Dr. James Murray's house on Banbury Road. And in my next video, I'm going to stay in the general area, but move one street over to where 2 of the most famous and creative thinkers of all time lived right next door to each other. I'll see you then.